Good morning. And today is a little bit different than what we were expecting this week was going to be. Normally, when we come into Holy Week, we are looking at a very busy time of year with services every day and all other sorts of other activities taking place as we're on the build up to Easter. This year is going to be a little bit different, and so in light of that, I thought I'd do something a little bit different this year. And we are going to have every morning at 9 o'clock, I'm going to put a different devotion up, and I invite you to follow along with that. I'll be lurking around down in the comment section, so I'll pop in and say hi if you want to chat or ask a question or just see how things are going. While the video is rolling through its first time, please feel free to do so, or just leave a comment and I'll be watching for those, and I will leave comments and I'll reply back. And this could be just an opportunity for us to gather in a different way than we were expecting this year, but in a way I hope will help us to grow and deepen our faith together. And so where we're going with this year is we're starting where we left off yesterday with Palm Sunday. And we're going to be continuing throughout Luke's Gospel, starting in Luke chapter 19. And we're going to be looking at what is taking place, the events that Jesus is going through, the things that he is teaching, the other bits and activities of things that are going on around him as we are constantly and always building up to Easter. Now that's something that's really important, is that we are always building to Easter. We know how this story ends, and so we need to remember that we always read this in light of what is going to happen on Easter. As we do that, we'll see so much more of what Jesus is doing and saying will begin to make more sense, because he is preparing his disciples for what is to come, preparing us even still to this day for what it is that we are facing. And so remember, always read knowing that Easter is coming. Our first scripture passages we're starting with this morning are out of Luke chapter 19, and you'll see me reference down to my notes. I even hand wrote my notes for one, so this ought to be interesting for all of us. And we're in Luke chapter 19, and we're going to be in verses 41 to 48, and then we're going to pop over to Luke chapter 21, verses 5 to 28. And there are three passages, there are three stories in here that we're looking at. And the first is when Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple. So if you want to turn to there and you want to read through those, please feel free to do so. I'm not going to read them out loud, but I do invite you to come back and take a look at them as we go. And I will point out a few things, though, as we go through this devotion. And the first is that in that, where Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple, or the destruction of Jerusalem, it says in verse 46, they won't leave one stone on top of another within you. Telling Jerusalem that it is all going to be leveled and completely flattened. The second part of the story that we want to look at takes place just right after that, and this is where Jesus goes into the temple and he clears out the temple of the money changers. This is one of my favorite stories. It's the only time we ever really see Jesus get demonstrably angry at anyone, as he is going in and he's flipping over tables and he's kicking people out of the temple and what it is that they're doing. And the verse that I want to focus on there is verse 48. Is to look at that and know that things were going to change drastically. This is what Jesus is doing when he's going in there. He is upending everything that they had in place and changing it drastically, and they aren't going to be able to go back. They're going to be forever changed by what it is that Jesus is doing. And the final part of this passage. Final story I want to look at this morning is the longest out of chapter 21, verses 5 to 28. And these are the signs of the coming of the end of the age. And there's a whole lot that is there. And this is also the place where Jesus says that the temple itself is going to be destroyed. And that's really important to know, that is what he is saying. And what he's telling folks throughout this passage is that the world is going to feel like it's collapsing around us. Now, I know that there's many of us that we can readily identify with what it is that Jesus is describing here, because we're feeling many of those same things. And this is what I want to remind us, and you're going to see me do this all week. This constant reminder, always and forever, that Easter is coming. We can remember that Easter is coming. And so we look at these three stories and we look and see what it is that they have in common. And these are the temple. We have Jerusalem, we have the temple, two different times that Jesus is interacting with the temple here. And what those are things that God tells folks to do. Jerusalem is the holy city, and the temple was the first time it was built, how God describes it to be built, and so that Solomon can build the temple, and then it is rebuilt. These are God things. But we have to remember something in there. They are God things, but they are built by human hands. That our presence is felt throughout their building. Meaning that they are not going to be permanent. And this is one of the things that we have to really be conscious of as we approach life, as we approach our faith, as we approach even good times we find ourselves, and even crises, is that when we're a part of it, that means they are not permanent. They are only ever going to be temporary. They will have an end. And so we look at these, we look at the signs that come out of all this. You can spend all the time in chapter 21 divining the meaning of all of these signs. And in fact, there have been entire books written. There have been entire periods of theology that have been spent trying to interpret the signs for the age that we're in. And we can spend a lot of time doing that, but it doesn't really help us out a whole lot. Because then we're just trying to predict when the end is going to come, and we're told multiple times in multiple places that we will neither know the day nor the hour. And that's not what's important for us here. What's important for us to see here is that we see these signs, not that we are looking for specific ones, but that we see that things are coming to its end. And it doesn't happen suddenly. It doesn't just automatically sudden one day and go, poof, we're done, it's over, and everything has collapsed and it's all rubble next to us. No, frailty sets in at one point. Things become far more fragile. We see a gradual decline. And what happens in the destruction is not the sudden moment when everything comes to an end. The destruction is the final moment when everything finishes its long process of collapse. Because they saw it coming. They knew it was coming, but they didn't know how to stop it. They were not equipped to be able to stop it or to change course. But this is where we remember that Easter is coming. The ultimate course change in human history is going to be coming into our midst. It is so very easy to get caught up in the details of what we see happening in this passage. And we can look for all the explicit signs and all that, but if we do that, we'll miss the things that we really need. Those signs, we have to remember, were particular to their day and to their place. That they knew what they meant. They were kind of things that they expected. They would not have been a huge surprise to the folks in that time. They knew what they meant. That was particular to them in their time and their place. For us, ours are going to be different because we live in a different time and a different place. The question is not what signs are we looking for. The question is, what are they telling us? And what they're telling us is that what has been made is coming to an end, but Easter is coming. It's easy to be afraid in the midst of this, and I've been preaching those words for a very long time, and I never thought they would have quite as much meaning as they do now. It is so very easy to be afraid, because it can feel like we're living in the time that Luke is writing about, and quite frankly, we might be. But that's okay. Because we remember that we read this story knowing what the end is going to be. That it's okay to be afraid. It's okay that we live in times like this. It's okay to worry about things that are coming. But always we do this. We live out our story, the story that God is telling through us, knowing how that story is going to end. That Easter is always coming. That there is always hope for resurrection when things feel like they have hit their absolute worst. So I want you to do this today. At the end of every one of these, I'm going to have just kind of a question, some time for reflection. I'm going to ask you. Today's might be a little bit more extensive, but I want you to do this. First, don't have fear. It's okay to be afraid, but don't have fear. Have faith instead. Don't be fooled into trying to divine the signs for some sort of hidden meaning. Generally, the signs are pretty clear. Instead, have faith. Look towards what is coming. And finally, we can find our strength in God. We can find our strength in the community that we're a part of, that God has brought us together as a community, as a very large community of faith. And we can draw strength from that because we know then that God is working in those moments and that He has made us to be a part of that. And so what comes in the future, we can face because we remember that Easter Sunday is coming up at the end of this week, and that with that, we can find life. I hope you have a good day. No matter how you spend it today, no matter how much time you have spent inside, I think it's supposed to be a nicer day today. But I hope you have a good day. And come back and join me tomorrow morning. Go in peace. Amen.